Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. We are in Haleyville, Alabama. We are here to see the grave of Mr. Haney. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all. It begins right now. So this is where Pat is buried at this church, the United Methodist Church, Maxwell. They don't really have a sign or anything, but his parents, a lot of his family's buried here. I think his father was the pastor here at one time. From what I was able to read, it looks like his mother, her original name was Maxwell. So I think this might have been her family's church. See the hallelujah falling down over here, and I feel like I should fix it, but I don't want people that drive by to wonder what the heck I'm doing, so. Let's see, it looks like there's a sign over here under the bell. In memory of Winifred Maxwell. Maxwell Chapel United Methodist Church, established 1911. So Pat was born in 1915. I think he was the last of the children of the family. He had 4 brothers and 2 sisters. It's a nice quiet little cemetery. This is Haleyville, and he was born and raised in Addison, which is about 30 minutes away. This is the family plot, and the first row right here are all Maxwell's, but Pat is this one right here. His birth name, Maxwell Emmett BUTTRAM, June 19th, 1915, January 8th, 1994. Nice long life. Then his parents are down here at this end. His father was originally the pastor in Addison and then would move around, Wilson. And so I think he was pastor out here eventually. And then that's his mother, Mary Emmett Maxwell BUTTRAM. She only lived to be 60 years old. How sad is that? Not a real long life, but if you look over here on the opposite side of the side that says Maxwell, it does say Pat. So there's the man we knew from the movies, Pat BUTTRAM. Man deserves paradise who can make his companions laugh. Boy, did he ever. He was funny when he was younger. He developed that voice of his where it sounded like he was going in and out of puberty. That was not his normal voice, but it was a voice that he developed when he was a younger man and knew was funny, so he could just kind of go in and out of it whenever he wanted. So he originally wanted to, and went to college to become a pastor, but a couple of months in, he saw the drama department and then got interested in that, and people saw how funny he was. And one night in a show, a talent scout saw him and wanted to represent him and helped him get on a local radio show, which he did, and he was funny on there. And then they got him a bigger audition at the Chicago World's Fair of 1933-34. So Pat went to that, and they pretended that he was someone from the audience. They were interviewing basically a country boy, wanted to know what his impressions of the big fair were. And Pat was so funny doing his voice that they ended up giving him a full-time job, and he ended up doing the barn dance. Barn dance was a big time in his career because this is where he would meet a lot of the country superstars, the people, the cowboys. They were on the radio. So he met people like Gene Autry during this time. And Gene Autry decided he wanted to join the military effort during World War II. And so when he left, they promoted Roy Rogers, and Smiley Burnett, who was Gene Autry's sidekick, went to work for Roy Rogers, but Roy also had Gabby Hayes, and so they ended up hiring eventually Pat, because Pat had his own radio show. He moved out to Los Angeles in the 40s, and he was good on his own show, so they started putting him in things like that, and he was a good sidekick. But when Roy Rogers already had 2 other sidekicks, they didn't really need him, so they ended up firing him. And right around that time is when Gene Autry was getting out of the service, and Gene was coming back, and Smiley was already signed up with Roy Rogers, and Gene remembered Pat, and so he ended up hiring Pat to be his new sidekick, and would actually call him by his name on the episodes and everything. And in the movies, he'd be Pat Buttram, and they ended up going on to have a really great friendship and a great career. They ended up making together 40 movies, over 100 radio appearances and TV appearances. They were great friends. They used to have lunch pretty much I think once a week for most of their life. They would talk on the phone every single day, and were basically like brothers. Sometimes even people would say they were closer than brothers because they got along so great. But it was actually on the set of one of Gene's movies that changed Pat's life. Actually, in a couple of ways. It was one that during one of their movies in 1950, they would work with a woman named Sheila Ryan, who was Gene's leading lady for the movie. But her and Pat fell in love, and they started dating, and eventually would be married and would be together until Sheila's passing. But it was also 1950 while they were filming a movie, a prop cannon went off and shot a piece of shrapnel across Pat's face that ended up messing up his eye. It ended up having like a 12-inch laceration that shot inside of him and punctured his lung. He was in the hospital for a long time and almost didn't live, which, had he not lived, obviously we would have never had any of those great Disney movies. We would have never had Green Acres. But that was an amazing next chapter in his life when he was done doing all the cowboy stuff with Gene Autry. He ended up getting Green Acres, and his method of coming up with the character of Mr. Haney, who would use that crazy voice of Pat's that would warble in and out, was that he had met Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, and he saw the way Colonel Parker was kind of this ex-carny who was kind of swarmy, and Pat decided to base his character of Mr. Haney off of Colonel Parker, who was Elvis's manager. For as great as that show was, Mr. Haney was absolutely one of the greatest characters, because he's the one that sold them the house. He's the one that anytime Mr. Douglas needed to buy anything, somehow Mr. Haney would happen to show up and happen to have it on his truck, and it would just happen to be very expensive and overpriced, or Mr. Haney would show up and have something that Mr. Douglas didn't need, and he'd try and find a way to con him into buying it, or breaking something else around the farm so that he'd have to buy it. Really funny character. He was on both Green Acres and Petticoat Junction because it was the same network, and the two shows were tied together because of Paul Henning. But unfortunately, when the studio got a new head, they decided to axe all of their country shows, which was like Green Acres, Petticoat Junction, and the Beverly Hillbillies. They ended up canceling them all, but Pat was so popular that for the rest of his life he could make appearances, and would make appearances as Mr. Haney and go out and meet fans. And he was just a really beloved country comic entertainer that really could do anything he wanted, and they would use that great voice of his for a lot of the Disney movies that we all grew up with that we loved so much. I was surprised when I read about Pat having that accident on the movie, the cannon blowing up, because it was actually out in Pioneer Town, out past Joshua Tree, where I have vlogged many times and spent a lot of time. But when that happened, they were kind of out far away from the hospital, so Gene Autry actually summoned a helicopter to take Pat to the hospital, and then would visit Pat for the months that he was in the hospital there would pay for all of his debts, pay for all the health care, make sure, you know, everybody that he was affiliated with was taken care of. And it was kind of funny afterward when he finally recovered and everything that Pat would carry around a newspaper article that said Cowboy star Gene Autry almost hurt. And it was talking about the accident where Pat literally almost died. Pat was quite a renaissance man when you think about it, because not only a gifted actor and could do the voices switching in and out whenever he wanted to, but also a love of religion. He was also known to be a successful rancher when he wasn't out filming, and was good with the stock market, so he never really had any financial woes. And when he retired and moved back to Alabama, he and his brother Gus would end up putting their money together for a camp for the less fortunate, kind of a religious camp for the less fortunate. And it's no longer a camp, but the grounds are still here, so I want to try and find those while we're out here. I was kind of surprised to read that after he retired from full-time acting in 1980, because he had done it from basically the 40s till 1980, he was really passionate about politics, and he was a friend of Ronald Reagan's, so he would help Ronald Reagan punch up his jokes for different speeches that he was going to give, and he was really passionate about being a Republican. He said when Bill Clinton was running for president and Al Gore was his running mate, he would tell his friends he was completely shocked that people bought into him, because him being a real country boy, he couldn't believe that people couldn't see through this fake country boy act that he thought that they were putting on. So Pat moved back here after his wife Sheila passed away. She ended up getting lung cancer and passing in 1974. Surprised she wasn't buried out here. She's buried at Valhalla Cemetery in Hollywood, or not North Hollywood. But he, after that, he moved back out to Alabama, and he established the Golden Boot Award, which was an award given to country actors, country western actors. He was on Knight Rider. He was in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He was in, had a little part in Back to the Future. So he did work off and on even after he kind of retired from Hollywood. Now we're going to go down the road just a little bit past the church. So where we are right now are the former grounds of what was Camp Maxwell. Pat and his brother, who was, I think, 2 years older than him, Augustus, went by Gus. They both saw their father be a clergyman, minister, on horseback, going to different towns in the area and preaching at different churches every weekend. And so they wanted to give back. And so with the money that Pat would raise throughout his life for good causes, his brother Gus also, while a young man, suffered a form of paralysis from tuberculosis. So they both decided to give back by, basically when they retired, they founded this Camp Maxwell, and it was for handicapped children with a kind of a religious influence on the camp. And they could come out here and play and rejoice. And now I think it's someone's private property, because when the brothers both passed away, it ended up closing down. But what a nice thing to give back to. You can see there's still some of the things here on the grounds and the sign. Well, it's sad, even though the old sign's kind of the only thing left and the camp's gone, at least the sign's left. I want to thank Elizabeth Ramsey and David Howard for becoming my newest Patreons. Thank you all for watching the story and the life of Pat BUTTRAM. Have a great night, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.